They have this thing in computer science called Hello World. And it's this idea of what's the simplest program that you can write in any language? What's the simplest thing that we can communicate? And most of the time, what it looks like is just making the screen say, Hello World. Maybe this is the simplest thing for me. I have this idea and this thought, and it's been communicated to me that we write to forget. Except for I'm a verbal processor. And I'm a designer, and I'm a visual person. I love the idea of crafting a look and a feel, crafting a place, working really hard to do things like move the camera and make things less static. So here we are. This is a hello world. This is me talking to forget. This is, what are we on? July 5th, 2023. This is the story of Church Phone from my point of view. This is the story of what God is doing right now. And it's crazy. I read this verse. I want to pull this up. This impacted me so heavily in my Bible reading today. And it makes me weep. This is 1 Kings 11, verse 1. It says, "Now King Solomon loved many foreign women. Beside Pharaoh's daughter, he married women from Moab, Ammon, Edom, Sidon, from among the Hittites." Just add an S in front of that one. "The Lord had clearly instructed the people of Israel, 'You must not marry them, because they will turn your hearts to their gods.' Yet Solomon insisted on loving them anyway. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and in fact, they did turn his heart away from the Lord. In Solomon's old age, they turned his heart to worship other gods instead of being completely faithful to the Lord his God, as his father David had been. Solomon worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites." Molech is who the babies were sacrificed to in the Old Testament consistently, just like today with abortion. In this way, Solomon did what was evil in the Lord's sight. He refused to follow the Lord completely as his father had done. And then the chapter continues, and it talks about basically every adversary that the Lord is rising up to fight against Solomon. And he puts thorn in Solomon's side after thorn in Solomon's side. And he makes a promise, in essence, that he's not going to remove Solomon from power. He's going to let Solomon die in power. But a key thing, he's going to divide the kingdom and give Solomon 2 tribes out of the 12. And it's brutal. I think about our modern church today. I think about how many times have we let culture creep in? You see, the thing that the Lord was concerned about with all these wives was their culture. And their culture came from religion. We have this common phrase that politics is downstream from culture. And culture is downstream from religion. That's my bit that I'm tacking onto this. That it starts with religion. It starts with belief. It starts with who will you bow to? What consumes you? Where is your eye pointed at? What are you focused on? Solomon was entrapped, even through great wisdom, could not protect him from the lust inside of his heart to have what no other man could have. I kind of half-heartedly joke about this sometimes. Like, Solomon's got 700 wives, 300 concubines, called a grand, 1,000 women. He's got at least one anniversary every single day. And he so filled his world, his inner circle, with voices that spoke against what the Lord wanted to do. And I think about us as believers. I was joking about Harry Potter and Game of Thrones on Instagram today, of just like how eager we are to consume the same things that the world produces that we know is wrong. But we have this excuse, oh, it's fiction. Oh, it's, it's just a story, and I love the story. I love the craftiness of it. And I have so much pushback against that. It's just like, are you going to let yourself bow to their gods? Is that the best we can do as believers? And I'm just like, no, we can do better than this. We have to do better than this. We have to live like every single part of this Bible is true and righteous and holy. And when we don't, what are we doing? We were at C3 LA this past Sunday. Incredible service, incredible church. Absolutely love the C3 family. I think it's the best family that I've been a part of from a church world. And it was all around this idea of what the sermon was all around this idea of what is the culture that you're consuming. Are you going to spend 17 hours on TikTok and 5 minutes reading your Bible? Well, TikTok is actually what's discipling you and pastoring you. And I think about us as believers, like, what will it take for us to just be righteous? Like, are we willing to do the great sacrifice? Are we willing to just get off of our social media, get off of the culture that's being produced by the world around us? What's interesting about Molech is this god who they sacrificed babies to. We've had abortion in our nation for 50 years. And it finally has become a states' rights issue. And I celebrate that it is now a states' rights issue. But man, dude, I'm so fervently against what is happening. And like, these children, they have rights. It's a child inside of the womb, and they are defenseless against the monstrosity that we have allowed. 70 million babies have been killed over 50 years, and 49 of those years are the church's fault. Because we refused, and we said, we will not interact with culture. We won't stand up for the obvious things, like life and liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Will we not give these children an opportunity to live a full life, to live in happiness and have liberty? Will we not give them this opportunity? And I think every pastor just kind of sat idle. And I know there was a completely different set of pastors that were fighting tooth and nail for the last 50 years. And Catholic bishops that were fighting tooth and nail. And people from every spiritual kind of background within Christendom that were fighting tooth and nail. But I can tell you that the resounding cultural Christian response was, we're not going to deal with this because it looks like politics, because it's too political. You see, every wife that Solomon married was about politics. It was about producing an alliance. He married Pharaoh's daughter, not because of her beauty or because the Lord directed him to, but because it led him into a peace deal with Pharaoh, and that they were able to trade. All of these choices were political. But the Lord looks at the heart and saw the politics that sat behind it, that we have to be wary of and push against. So that's kind of a wrap on my spiritual thought for today. That's just been like burning on my heart. We've got just some other awesome stuff. We're in the middle of just trying to figure out, like, what is Church Fun going to be? You know, we've got our product, but I really feel like there's a message and a voice that sits inside of us that we need to communicate, that's around discipleship, and kind of these two questions. And we're going to do a bunch of interviews just around these two questions. The first is, what does discipleship, healthy discipleship, look like in your church? And it's beyond just the, what we get them in team, we get, serving on team and attending a group. It's, it's what is the process in your church of taking someone who isn't saved, making them into a disciple who makes disciples, who can reproduce. Be fruitful and multiply, the first command to mankind, and I think it's also the first command to believers when you look at the Great Commission. For all disciples, go, multiply yourself, reproduce. Paul says in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 1 and 2, I, Paul, have entrusted to you, Timothy, now find reliable men who can teach others, who will teach others. And it's this notion of this is the master plan. Okay, 2 by 2 onto the ark. Let's go make some more and get some more people onto the ark. 2 by 2. And this, I'm drawing this 2 by 2 directly through Luke 10. Go 2 by 2, find a man of peace, minister to their family. And this notion of the ark, I don't think people realize what a terrible day of judgment sits in front of us. That I'm going to go all crazy here. I think your viewpoint on this has to just dramatically shift. If we're in this mindset that, okay, we're going to get raptured, we're out of here, we're just waiting for the Lord to return, we're going to sit on our butts. And it's like, no, man, we have an ark that gets us out of this picture in this scenario. We might be hit by the fire and the torment and the judgment. The rain falls on the righteous and the wicked. But man, we have the solution for the hour, for the coming judgment of all mankind. We are the only ones that have the solution. You are the only one that can lead your neighbor to the Lord. You are the only one that can minister to the lost. It is your responsibility. It's my responsibility. And so in this, we've been just kind of picking up on there's these two core questions that have to be asked. How do we make disciples who make disciples? What is that process inside of your church? How can we gather that, put all the good bits together from churches all across America and all across the globe, and get to just a good best practice guide? This is an evolution out of we are a seeker church. We are trying to get people to attend our church. Jesus wasn't trying to get people to attend his ministry. Several times he offends everybody away except for the disciples. He was producing disciples. And it spread like wildfire because of the intentionality of calling somebody to greatness. And Jesus does this through offending people over and over and over. He builds relationship, brings them to a cliff, and then offends them into righteousness. They either have to make a choice, and this is the way that I view Romans 12, 1 through 2, the process of renewing our mind is actually the Lord bringing us to a moment where we have to separate from our previous train of thought. And the best separator is offense. And you can follow this thread when Peter stands up on the day of Pentecost and he preaches and he tells that 3,000, he says, you killed him. You crucified him with Pontius. It was your responsibility. And on your shoulders will this sin rest. And it says there that the word pierced their heart. When you look at the Greek there, I forget what the Greek word is, but I remember its meaning. It means that they were shaken to their core. They were offended to the point that they received salvation, and they were able to change. And in that moment, 3,000 are added to their number, whereas 3,000 died when the Moses' covenant, the covenant of law, was given. And so you see this duality and this symbolism that's happening. And so what is this process of making disciples? And then the second question is, what do we have to do to see Gen Z saved? What do we have to do to see the woke, the lesbians, the gay, the homosexuals, the trans community? What do we have to do to see them saved? What do we have to do to see Antifa saved? What do we have to do to see Black Lives Matter saved? What do we have to do to see communists and revolutionaries and these individuals that are begging for societal change? You see, there's two underlying things that are so key about this general movement that has happened. The first is They've come to the realization that identity is molded, that you are the chooser of your identity. Ironically, they travel as a herd, and there's a thought leader, this kind of woke mind virus that once infected, everybody must stand for current thing, but that current thing looks like a furthering evolution of their identity. And the second thing that I think is so massive that we have to cling on to is they have this belief that the identity that they received when they were born is not the identity that they must die with. For them, it's this idea that God made me incorrectly, and he made a man in a woman's body, and he made a woman in a man's body, and he made a furry in a human body. This idea that every aspect of my identity must shift because there is something different inside of me that is a truer reality. And this is the classic Gnostic belief that you see, through Genesis chapters 1 through 11, basically this idea, the snake comes to Adam and Eve, hey, there is a hidden truth that you can only receive to become like God through eating of the apple. And again, you see this with the Tower of Babel. There is a hidden truth that only through government can we achieve this higher level of understanding and being. And this is why government is so important. And on his shoulders rests government. And yet it is through government and the subversion of the devil that he tries to enter in. So, pulling back the circle, basic Gnostic beliefs. But the reality is we agree in principle with these core things. We just completely disagree with the destination. We believe that you must die to everything of who you are to become like him. That every aspect of your identity you have to give over. All of your giftings, your callings, your nature, your character, everything has to bow before the cross, and we are supposed to live like Christ. We are supposed to be Christian like Christ. We are supposed to receive the mind of Christ. We have to have the baptism of the Holy Spirit so that the Spirit may dwell inside of us and live in us. There's a transformation that has to happen. I cannot live like myself. And when I choose to live like myself, that's where sin enters in and happens. And so the big question is, how do we go from hating these people? Because the reality is, I have hate in my heart towards them. And I'll break it down like super practically. Like, I look at the shooting that happened in Nashville, and I have hate in my heart. I look at all of these drag shows for kids, and I have hate in my heart. I have both a righteous anger about the situation, but I also have my fleshly response, which is, I want nothing to do with them. And I know if the devil can convince us to stay in this mode where we go, we want nothing to do with them, we will never reach them, they will never be saved, and we will go on our merry way, reaching no one. They are the next generation, and righteousness must come to them as well. And so these are the two questions that we're really going to push on. I know this is a long explanation, like 7 people are going to watch this video. Whatever. It's more for me than for you. And it kind of pushes down this path, like, can we see revival? Like, what will it take to see revival today? Can we see it? I want to see it. I don't want to die and not see the generation that has come after me not have a move of God that transforms their lives. And I'll say this definition over and over. Like, my definition for revival is people getting saved that typically wouldn't get saved. That there's a supernatural aspect where it shuts down the working of the enemy in an area, and there's mass salvation, deliverance, healing, and transformation. Salvation. Sozo, saved, healed, delivered. The three things that we get out of Isaiah that the Lord paid for on the cross, that those three things together happen in mass impact. So what does that play out? Well, you're going to see a lot more of our parent company name. Our parent company is called Steeple. And I was chatting with Carson. I think this is just so beautiful. This actually, like, I like the name Steeple, but I've always been like, hey, is Steeple the right name for us? Our product used to be called Steeple. We got some advice and feedback. Call it Church Phone. We called it Church Phone. Went through a rebranding. We kept some of the core colors. We changed the fonts a little bit. But our company, we're Steeple Inc. And I had this idea and just this thought process of like, what would a modern day TBN look like? We know that TV's dead, but we know that there has to be a voice that is speaking really loud. There has to be a steeple. And this generation, they don't know what a steeple is. I mean, they might know it. They might be, oh, it's the thing that the horse jumps over. It's a steeple race. Did you time yourself to how quickly you got the pun? The other side of it is, they see churches. The steeple was supposed to sit higher above the city line than anything else so that you knew where the church was. The tower, the clock, and the bell. These are the three key things. It told you where in time you were, and it communicated to you about your day every single day. Second of all, the bell, it calls you to the church every single time. It lets you know, hey, it is church time. Start walking to church. And because of its centrality, it became, hey, we're going to meet at the church because it's the thing that we see. And I go, okay, can we be a steeple on social media? Can we have a voice and a message that goes out? Maybe. And that excites me a little bit. I'm like, maybe we can kind of resurrect some of those ideas. So what it practically looks like, I have no idea. I'm like searching through domain names. I'm scratching my head. But we'll see. It could be something. So we have Steeple, a bunch of social media, doing a bunch of stuff. We want to talk about culture pretty heavily. We want to talk about how this move of God is going to happen, how we can see this transformation, these interviews. But we also want to have a lot of fun. I was toying around with this idea of going to different churches with money guns, and during the offering time, just like running towards the stage and shooting money guns at the preacher and just seeing how they respond. It's probably something we would never do, but I have a comedic side of me and kind of want to make light a little bit of some of our church culture and the way that we do things. But it's like, can we be fun and real? Can we not compromise our message, but can we figure out kind of together, how do we reach this next generation? And I think part of it is church phone, but I think God is calling us to so much more than like, do my sheep know the sound of my text? I think God is calling us to, shift the rudder a little bit on the Western church with kind of like this ultimate goal, like how can we see revival happen, and then how can we steward it? So that's my hello world. I call these my musings. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be an incredible ride. We've got an incredible week lined up in front of us. We've got a great interview with a pastor tomorrow that's going to be super exciting. I don't want to spoil anything about it yet. But he stood up for righteousness in 2016. And it was the greatest and most liberating thing that he could have done. And I want you guys to hear his story. I want you guys to hear how deep he went on going, hey, my people need to look like me. I, Paul, have entrusted to you Timothy, now find reliable men who you can teach, who will teach others. And it's this imprint, Timothy, my son. Like how with so much passion, Paul was producing sons. And you see a little bit of his argument with John Mark and with Barnabas of like, hey, this guy isn't turning into a son, so I would rather not travel with him unless he is willing to become a son. And he becomes a son. And there's a whole redemption arc there that's really beautiful. So these interviews are going to be incredible. We're doing a bunch here in the LA area over the next kind of 10 days. Then we're off to VU conference, which is going to be great. But that's a wrap. Love you guys. God bless.